Thank you, Steve. Well, it's an honor to be here. Honest to gosh, I can't believe 42 years ago I ran my first and only Jack 15. And now I'm going to give her a shot tomorrow. What do you think? I think I ran like 1:14 and some change.
1:14.54.
1:14.54. So if I could double that time tomorrow, so get in like around 2:30, I would be tickled pink if that will happen. I can't guarantee it will, but no, it's going to be fun to put one foot in front of the other tomorrow from White down to the Campanile here. So, you know, I can't tell you how much this community of Brookings has meant to me and what it's done for my running. So in 1978, I came out here for one semester. I ran the fall of 1978. Coach Underwood gave me a partial scholarship to come out here, and I ran just the fall of 1978. But I met some of the finest people I've ever met in my life. The Bills brothers, the Brants from Clear Lake, just north of Brookings here, Ken Cazadlo, and my best friend for 44 years now, I think, Mike Dunlap. I met Mike the very first day when I walked into at the Hyper Center for our first cross-country meeting. I didn't know a soul. And I walked in there, I kind of stood over in the corner, and the rest of the guys came in, they kind of looked at this foreigner over in the corner there, and Mike came over and introduced himself, and we've been best friends ever since. And when I was here at school, I didn't have a nickel in my pocket, and Bob Bartling kind of took me under his wing, and you know, Bob had a running store in the basement of his furniture store, him and Lorne, and so Bob one day knew I needed shoes. I was duct taping them together just to hold them together, and he slipped me a pair of shoes and says, "Don't worry about it, Dick." It's probably against NCAA rules, but we didn't tell anybody. But boy, having that new pair of shoes on my feet, it made an unbelievable difference. And when I was out here, it was the first time I ever started to run 100+ mile weeks. And I saw how that paid off. So in the late fall, early winter of 1980, I was training to run the 1980 Olympic Marathon trials. I'd never broken 2 hours and 20 minutes before, but I qualified at the Winnipeg Marathon in 1970, the summer of 1979. You had to run 2:21:56, and I ran 2:21:54. So I just snuck underneath it. So I was training real hard that winter, and I ran a few races in late March, and I mean, I remember one time I got beaten by just about, is that mic not on? Battery might be out, huh? There we go. I remember getting beat by almost everybody in a 25K up in Hopkins, and I was tired all the time, and I thought I'd lost my zest for running. And I was about ready to hang it up before the Olympic trials when my mom convinced me to go to the doctor, and they found out I was very, very anemic. So they put me on iron supplements, and I started feeling better, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to run the Olympic Marathon trials in Buffalo, New York. It's going to be my last race. I'm just going to run it so I can tell my kids and grandkids, hey, your old man ran in the Olympic trials. And that was going to be it. So I ran in the Olympic trials, and because I'd been sick most of the winter, I'd been training, but not at the level I thought. So I went out way conservative than I normally did, but I started feeling good. Long story short, that day, it was the first time I'd ever broken 2 hours and 20 minutes. I ran 2:16:01 that day and finished 16th out of a couple hundred runners, and I was not halfway through the finish chute. And I remember saying to myself, I am not quitting now. And so I came out here, so that was in May of 1980. I came out here in June. That was when the Jack was back in June back then in 1980. I came out here, and this race, honestly, and I'm not just saying this because I'm here, I've said this to so many people over the years, the race that changed the way I thought about my competing against the big boys was the Jack 15. because it was the first time in my running career that I'd ever run under sub 5-minute pace for more than 10K. And that day, I think I went up against Warren Eide. I think Warren and I were together for the first maybe half of the race or something, and then I was able to pull away from him. And I remember coming across that finish line, running under an hour and 15 minutes, and I thought to myself, I never said this to anybody else, but I thought, I think I could go another 10 or 11 miles at this pace. That's how good I felt. That race, that day, gave me so much confidence. And so that fall, I ran my very first New York City Marathon. And I woke up that morning, the day of the race, and back in every marathon I'd ever run up to that point, I always wrote my splits on my forearm because I was more concerned about my time. But when I got up that morning, and because of the Jack 15 race, I got up that morning, I thought, you know what? If I'm ever going to find out if I can run with the big boys, forget about your time. You go out there and you hang with that lead pack as long as you can. So that day it was a very cold, windy, kind of a rainy day, and I got to the starting line, and Bill Rogers was going for his 5th consecutive New York City Marathon win. A young buck named Alberto Salazar was running his very first marathon. And he came to New York City that week and said, I'm not only going to win the marathon, I'm going to break 2:10. Pretty high level of confidence there. So anyhow, the gun goes off, and I go out with that lead group, and we're all bunched up pretty close together, and we're running at, around 5-minute pace, something like that. Well, about 14 and a half miles, there's about maybe 10 or 12 of us left in that lead group. And we're tightly bunched, and we're going around a corner, and somehow Bill Rogers and I got our legs tangled up. And we both went down like we were shot. I fell on my right shoulder, my elbow was bleeding, my shoulder's bleeding, my hip. We can hear you. Okay, my hip was bleeding, and I remember laying there on the ground, and I looked, let's just put this thing down. And I looked, can you hear me? Yeah. And I looked behind me, and Bill was sitting on the ground, but turning the opposite direction. Well, another runner from behind came by and helped Bill up. Of course, they went flying right by me because they had no idea who I was. I was wearing a high number. Well, I finally get up off the ground, and by this time, the lead pack was about 2 blocks in front of me. Now, stupidly, instead of just easing my way back up there, I took off and I caught that lead pack almost immediately, just before we're going over the Queensboro Bridge. Now, when you go over the Queensboro Bridge, there's no spectators up there. All the wind is just, all you hear is the wind coming through the girders. Well, about halfway across the Queensboro Bridge, I'm in this lead group, and the adrenaline is pumping out of me from the fall. I mean, it's coming out of every open orifice I have. Well, about halfway across, I'm thinking, I'm going for it. So I put on a big hard surge, and I open up about a 150-meter lead. So as I come down onto First Avenue, now this is back then when Wide World of Sports was covering it live on television. So when you come off the Queensboro Bridge, you make this little loop coming down off the bridge, and you come onto First Avenue. It's where the biggest crowds are. So I've got police cars in front of me, people on motorbikes, the ABC television crew in front of me, and I come down there as the first athlete of that New York City Marathon in 1980, and the roar of the crowd literally made my legs buckle, and I pretty near fell down. It was unbelievable. So I get about 100 meters down onto First Avenue. The crowd is going nuts, and all of a sudden I notice something off to my right, and I look over, and it's my coach, Bill Squires, sprinting alongside of me in his Sunday go-to-church shoes on. And he looks at me, he goes, Dickie. He always called me Dickie. He goes, Dickie, what in the hell are you doing? I go, Coach, I'm winning the New York City. So, let's just say I didn't win the New York City Marathon. But by gum, so anyhow, I get down there on the First Avenue, the crowd's going nuts, and my folks are back home in Minnesota watching it on television, and I saw this later on a video, but so Jim McKay turns to Frank Shorter, who was the analyst in the race that day, doing the TV. He goes, Frank, who is this guy out in front with that high number? And Frank says, I have no idea, but he looks like a cream puff to me. Again, like throwing the shoe at the television. Well, I ended up fading a little bit that day, but I ended up finishing, Alberto won, and he did run under 2:10. He ran 2:09:48, I think. I don't think Bill, even if he hadn't tripped, would have won the race that day. But Bill finished 5th. I finished 9th. So 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, those 5 runners, we all finished in the 2:13. I ran like 2:13:55 that day. And I was tickled. I really was. And so that night I'm at the banquet. And I don't know anybody. I'm standing over in the corner like kind of like this, and just trying not to get in anybody's way, when I see Bill Rogers start walking towards me. Now Bill is a little older than I, but as a young runner, or as I really got into marathoning, Bill was like my Mickey Mantle if I was a Little League baseball player. So Bill starts walking towards me, and he gets about this far from my face. He's not smiling at all. He goes, are you Dick Beardsley? And I look right at him and I go, yes, Mr. Rogers. And he takes his hands and he starts choking me. Not real hard, but he starts choking me. And then all of a sudden he breaks out into this big smile and he goes, Dick, no hard feelings, that's what racing is all about. And we've been best of friends ever since. Yeah, so that's what this running sport is such a neat deal. And that was just one of many stories that I could tell you. How much time do you have? You want to wrap this up?
Wrap it up at about 8:45.
Yeah, so I'm gonna wrap it up here pretty quick. But again, tomorrow how many of you are running the full 15.2 miles? Good. Yeah. Now, hopefully, I saw there's electric timing, is that right?
Yes.
Do you also have a sundial for me? Because it's going to take something like that. But you know what, I tell you, I'm excited about running it tomorrow. You know, when I retired from competitive running after the 1988 Olympic Marathon Trials, still going to run, and I run every day. I'm slower than molasses in January, but I go to bed at night, and I can hardly wait to get up in the morning to run. But I remember when I retired from that high level of training and racing, I remember a lot of my friends and people I didn't even know said, well, you're going to probably quit running now, or you'll never run another race again because you'll be so disappointed because you'll never be able to get those times that you ran in your younger days. And that has never, ever crossed my mind or never, ever bothered me. I just thank the good Lord that I can still get out there and put one foot in front of the other. You know, I've had 3 knee replacements and 3 spinal fusions, and the fact that I can still get up in the morning. And my goal is to be like BB, Bob Bartlett. He's 96 years young. I mean, he's amazing. If I'm still around at 96 and I look as good as him and can do what he does, man, that is one heck of a life. So listen, I can't wait to get out there with you tomorrow morning. We're going to go out there and put one foot in front of the other, and we'll all celebrate at the very end. And happy 60th birthday, Jack 15. You're one of the best. Thanks, everybody.